Serious, students of Reddit who had a SZO relationship with a teacher. How did it start and how did it turn out? I guess I technically had a SZO relationship with a teacher. She was the lab TA for my invertebrate zoology lab and refused to do anything with me until after the class. After classes, we partied and hooked up quite a lot. After a year of us still being together, other TAs started dating undergrads. 6-7 years later, we're married and have a kid together. Edit. Because someone had to point out that I missed an apostrophe. Edit 2. My wife says it's 7 years. What does she know? So I actually didn't know she was my teacher. She was maybe 23-24 and I just turned 17. I was in California during summer vacation. Went to Disneyland. California Adventure. All the fun stuff. Met her while in line for Winnie the Pooh ride. None of my friends wanted to go with me. We had fun. Hit it off. And eventually go to her hotel room. Spent the weekend meeting up and hanging out and then we parted ways. First day of the new semester comes around and I see her in the classroom and I'm excited. I didn't know she went to this school and so I went in and sat down and she goes up to the front of the room and introduced herself to everyone and we did the whole get to know each other thing and what we did over summer. Got to me, her face turned purple like she couldn't breathe. I went to a vocational high school and attended the culinary program for 3 years. The baking instructor pastry chef was 7 years older than me and we grew up in the same small town. When I turned 18 and he left for another profession, we went on a few dates and had sex a couple times. We weren't a good fit together and ended on amicable terms. Pretty uneventful. I slept with one of my professors in college. At the time I was 19 or 20 and she was in her mid-30s. I went to see her during her office hours. We talked for a few minutes and when I went to leave she gave me a long hug and told me, "You give really nice hugs," as she held onto my arms. I asked for her number and went on my way. We exchanged a few flirty text messages over the next few days before she invited me over to her apartment to help her hook up a new TV she had bought. We ended up sleeping together about 10 times before she moved away to take a new job at a different school. I'm not a student anymore. It happened in the 90s when I was probably 8 or 9 and went on for more than a year. It started with making me sit on his thighs often and I could feel his erection. I never knew what to think of it as I never got any training or attention from parents about situations of sexual abuse. It went on from there. After 22 years of being a biologically straight guy, I still remember what that dirty stinking penis tasted like. The experience gave me depression and anxiety and inability to trust a relationship and get freaked out when I see a kid sitting on any man's lap. I woke up after a night full of bad dreams feeling sick in my stomach. Forgive me if I don't respond any further. And thanks immensely for your kind words and incredible support. It's important to protect and keep every child away from such negative forces, cause we remember. When I was 13, a friend of my family who was a sub at my school started coming on to me. She would flirt and ask if I needed any tutoring in my free time. We ended up sleeping together for a few years actually until I left for college. I know most will think this is it up, and it is, I am aware. But it didn't really damage me or anything and I really enjoyed it. I look back on it fondly. Even though now I realize how inappropriate it was. I still see her every now and then when I go home to see my parents and there is always a certain amount of tension there. Happened to me when I was in 7th grade. She was my conversations teacher. TBH, she was my first crush, which started when I was in 4th grade. She knew my parents. So sometimes I had to stay with her when they were late to pick me up from school. It happened 2 months before finals. She told me that she wanted to kiss me and if I was okay with this. I changed my school and she left town some years later. The dilemma is, although I remember time spent with her very fondly, I wouldn't want any other kid to be in the situation as I was in. I had a crush on a professor in college. Friend and I got drunk and decided to see if we could find his house because I got a hold of his address somehow. I was 21-2 and he was 40+. Anyway, stumbling around like idiots in the dark, and he comes out with a ball bat and was like, "Adatis Amoboros. What are you doing?" And I realized the only way out was through. So I fessed up to basically everything and ended by saying, "I'm so embarrassed. You should invite us in for a glass of wine." And he did. We started hooking up, and then for about 2 years, the sex was great, but then I moved and it didn't work long distance. He was a great cook. Really supportive and kind. And always had great weed. I actually really liked him, but, of course, he never wanted anything serious and we're not in contact anymore. Mine may not count, but I was 21 and in college and using a Cupid, and I matched with this cute girl who's a grad student. We hit it off and our fields of study are similar but not the same, so there's no chance there'll be a conflict of interest or anything, so we go out on a date to a dive bar. Get a bit drunk. Hit it off. Go back to her place to drink more and screw. Boned a teacher's aide intern that was a student at local community college my senior year. She was previously a student at this school and lived relatively close to my neighborhood. I had a study hall after lunch, which essentially meant I had a 2-hour lunch. She was only 3 years older and we had flirted a lot when she was still in school at the HS my sophomore year. Unfortunately, not everyone in this thread situation was as casual. My heart goes out to anyone that was actually abused. There was a super hot student teacher that was at our school. So he was only like 22/23 maybe. Does that count? I was 17 and it was at our graduation dinner when we had snuck a bottle of passion pop in. So we were pretty tipsy. I told him I always thought he was hot, and before I knew it his hands were down my pants. We still had about 3 weeks to go before we left school. So spent the next week eyeing around the school and nearly getting caught a bunch of times. It was pretty eyeing hot TBH, and I still think about him from time to time. As a person who supervises student teachers, this story gives me anxiety. When I was 17 I had a fake ID and went out to the bar with a couple older friends after a hockey game. We met a group of girls out and we hung out for most of the night. I ended up going home with one of the girls. We hooked up that night. We exchanged numbers and I left in the morning. So Monday comes around, I go to school and I walk into my first period class and the same girl I hooked up with is the supply teacher. Her face was about as red as an apple and I was strutting my seat like Vince McMahon. Kind of a belated SZOL experience. But with a happy ending for all. I had a crush on my undergrad professor and we had outstanding chemistry, but he was a decent man and nothing ever came of it, thank God, because I probably wouldn't have controlled myself. 10 years later we reconnected via social media and met up for a drink. 10 years after that, now, we've got 2 kids and a pretty nice life together. The wait was worth it. Got together with my college language teacher. Ended up dating for 2 years. Living together for 1 and almost getting married. Broke up because we were fighting too much. Was great until it wasn't. Technically not a teacher. More like a trainee teacher? Not quite sure how to call it in English. I was 16. She was 22. She wasn't only hot as, but even played the same games as I did. Had a similar humor and she studied to become a history ed teacher, my 2 absolute favorite subjects. Over time, she figured out I was very good at IT stuff, so she asked me to teach her more advanced programming stuff. She was very much at the beginning, so I had a lot to teach her. After a month of meeting up for purely educational purposes, she asked me out for a movie, which we actually watched, and one of the best blowjobs I have ever received, NGL. We pretty much were together for 3 years until she had to move away. We're still in contact though through an MMO we play. But she's married now. So I'm not getting one of those BJs again. I slept with my art history professor as a freshman in college. It was a class mostly focused on Chinese and Japanese ancient art. I was having trouble with the class and all the data dump of information. I asked her if I could do some extra credit work. She said to come to her office later that day. We started talking more and more because she liked my art. Or she was just flirting with me. Now that I think about it, Well, she asked me over to her house. She wanted to show me some of her art. She was in her late 40s and I was 18. I didn't think anything about it. Then, when I showed up at her house, she said she had to go change real quick. After a minute or so, she called me into the bedroom. When I saw her in her bra and panties, laying on her bed, I quickly thought back to the time we spent together and realized that I had it all wrong. But I was happy to be wrong at that time. My 11th grade chem teacher. It just kind of started. He was very asshole toward me. I just kind of helped instigate it. He got fired for a different reason lol. But we still hook up sometimes. Removed. I'm dating my high school teacher but only started after I graduated. I liked him. He didn't like me back. We kept chatting and eventually it did grow out to more. 4 years now and living together for 2. No. I didn't like him when he was teaching. But I did think he was very cool. My friends all slept with teachers. I cared mostly about the intoxicants they provided me with. I was the last of the seniors in my friend group to turn 18, so after midnight literally on my birthday a bunch of teachers and coaches came over to my party. They joked about how they were waiting for me to turn 18. I thought it was fun. Now I'm disgusted. That turned into them buying us alcohol and hotel rooms every night, giving me pills, and sleeping with my friends. I had to stop my best friend from booking a flight to Vegas to marry one less than a month after graduation. He ended up marrying another girl from my graduating class. He was then allowed to quietly resign when texts from a 16-year-old student were found on his phone. Wait. WT actual F. The teachers were all grooming and ritualistically sexually abusing students when they turned 18 or graduated? Ha. Reading these comments, all I'm getting is that I have a chance. I was in law school about to study abroad in China when my friend recommended we take an intro to Mandarin class so we have some idea what people are talking about. I notice the teacher is really cute. So at the end of the class I flirt with her and she invites me to a party she's throwing. One thing led to another and I dated her for a summer. It didn't. She was a not very attractive old woman who smoked too much so she sounded like Joan Rivers. I politely declined. But perhaps I should have gone for it because I ended up getting a C in her class. Should have got an A. My martial arts instructor. I was 24, he was 51. He made the first move when he asked me to stay after for privates. Obviously, there was a clear power imbalance. He set up the school so he was basically a god. It was honestly pretty hot, but very intense. We loved each other a lot. I was kicked out of the school when his business partner found out, which was super painful because I loved the art and the people. It was like my community. We are still friends but sometimes I hate him for all I went through. I slept with a teacher in my first year of 6th form. Played football for the school team. A load of teachers came to watch the first game of the year. At the end of the game I said I'm going to walk home when asked how I was getting home and said teacher said I will give you a lift if you like. I rode a motorbike but the weather was awful in the morning, so I agreed. We chatted for a bit then we had kiss when she dropped me off. The week later she asked me did I want to go further next time so I agreed to go to hers. Happened a few times over a couple of months. That's all really. Never spoke much after that. She started seeing one of the teachers in the school. Started after my last year in her class, turned out fun and ended fast, never talked about it with anyone, no problems, everyone was happy, it was fun. Exchange year in Spain. I walked into his class by accident because I had the room mixed up. I was also a bit late. So I interrupted the entire class accidentally and then blurted out, "Sorry, I made a mistake, pardon me equivoque," and he responded with, "And how? EICMO. Comma, and honestly the only thing I remember was thinking damn he's handsome." The next day he saw me, approached me, and said I missed you in class today. I laughed it off and signed up for his class immediately. It was a language class so they had movie showing. I think maybe a suspense horror film but sophisticated enough to be on the curriculum. And I went to the bathroom. When I came back I noticed him sitting in the back row, so I sat next to him and had to get real close to his ear to talk to him since the movie was loud. His hand had to get real close to mine because no reason. It was a great summer. IDK if you noticed but you didn't finish the story. Slept with a teacher in college. I was 18, he was late 20s. He was hot, I was hot. Went to his house, had one of the best sessions of sex I've ever had. He decided to only have it as a one-time thing, which I agreed to. Never told anyone about it because it was consensual and no one's business. Although I do remember having a conversation with him after the act in college with other students present, and he said something which he had said while we were together at his house. When I was 15 and in HS, I had a new English teacher right out of college, 22, and we started talking about the stories I would write in class, and one thing led to another and we would hook up 3-4 times a week for 2 years until she took a better job closer to her home. She was from out of state originally. I looked her up many years later hoping for another go, but she was happily married with 3 kids. Oddly enough, I became her English teacher and we are friends who visit frequently. Side note. This was back in the 80s and she never pushed me for anything. I was actually the one who pursued her and got lucky that she was lonely and away from her family. I became her English teacher. Really? Back during my junior year in high school, we suspected that this one girl was having a relationship with our business teacher. This went around for a bit until her father, also a teacher in the same school and board member, found out about it. They both denied it until she graduated that year. The teacher got fired and eventually married the girl. They're still together to this day. I dated a college teacher all 4 years of college. He added me on Facebook where he used to write erotic poetry along with pics of him shirtless. He was ripped off. I sent him a message saying that I loved his poems and that they were great for fantasizing. He started sending me different poems like the ones he would post. And one day he asked me if I pictured a specific someone when I was fantasizing with his poems. I said that there wasn't someone specific since I was single back then. He said, "What about me?" Full stop. So I went to his house, which was very close to college. And we had sex almost every other day for 4 years. During that time I didn't get any special treatment as his student or better grades. It ended a little after I graduated because I met someone with whom I was starting to fall in love. But sometimes we hook up if both of us are single. I was a junior in high school. My new English teacher's first year. New to town, knew no one. I was an athlete and ran a mountain late night 1030-12. A little verism involved. I used to run by her second floor apartment. And one night she was standing naked, DRPs open, just looking at me. I got real nervous and decided to enjoy the thought. The second time she waved, I waved back. At school I waited after class to ask a BS question and said, "Your show makes my night." She smiled, said if the front porch light was on, stop by. Never forget it. Friday night, I'm 17, porch lights, and I was so nervous, knocked on the door. She met me in a night. Said don't say anything. Took me and let me shower and gave me a night to remember. It went on for months until she found a boyfriend. I bought her a gift when it ended. After my senior year she took a job out of state and married the guy she was dating. A true gift of life. When I was a junior in college I found my professor on a dating app. We had a temporary relationship for 2 years and I moved to his apartment during my last semester. When I graduated I moved out of the country and we still keep in touch. We're both guys.